Our next speaker, Sri Nitin Sridhar, is a civil engineer by training and an author who writes on important subjects like politics, culture, and religion. He is the author of several books like Musings on Hinduism, Samanya Dharma, and Menstruation Across Cultures, a Historical Perspective, and appreciated widely. His recent book was an English commentary on Ishopanishad. He also contributes well-researched articles to serves as the chief curator of Indica Moksha, Advaita Academy, an initiative dedicated to dissemination of Advaita Vedanta. He welcome you.
Good morning, and I have a very difficult and dry topic. After all the energetic presentations, you may feel asleep, so apologize in advance. Let me begin with a small prayer. Sada Shiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavatyapta Dehaya Shri Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Bharati Karuna Patram Bharati Padabhushanam Bharati Padamarudam Bharati Tirthamashraye Vidya Vinaya Sampannam Vitaragam Vivekinam Vande Vedanta Tattvagyam Vidushekara Bharatim Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. So my topic is Decoding Manusmriti, some pointers to understand Dharmasastra text. So by Dharmasastra I mean the Smritis primarily, but also the subsequent commentaries, the whole tradition. All the texts that deal with Dharma, you can say is a Dharmasastra. Okay, this is better? Okay, yeah. So all the texts that deal with Dharma, that teach Dharma, including Mahabharata, Ramayana, everything, you can say it's a Dharmasastra. And before, can you change the slide? Yeah. So within the tradition, within our thousands of years of tradition, within our acharyas, all of them of different sampradayas, they were all held Manusmriti and other smritis in a very, as an authoritative text on Dharma. From Shankaracharya to Kumarilavatta to Vidyaranya, everybody has held it. However, in contemporary times, in the last 100, 200 years, the Dharmashastras have been completely sidelined. The text of Manusmriti is abused, is burned, and it's considered anti-women, anti-certain communities. So much of dismantling, abusing, all these things are happening. But most importantly, the text and its verses, it's considered very, very controversial. And part of the reason is because of the destruction of indigenous teaching tradition, we have all become kind of deracinated and derooted from our knowledge system. So there is a gap. We are all, from very childhood, we are trained to think in a certain way. We have imbibed the enlightenment values from the West, and so the Dharmashastric teachings appear alien to us. So this is one of the important reasons why when we read them in translations and excerpts on the internet, you find a lot of verses to be deeply problematic, deeply controversial, deeply outdated. So I'll be addressing briefly all of them. Can you change the slide? Yeah. So this is a recent one. I don't give her any credence. I would not have quoted her if this was not a recent one. This has happened before, this will keep happening. So she has quoted one particular verse which I'll be discussing at the end of the session about, she says Manusmriti is very misogynist. Why? Because it says women do not deserve independence, they have to be under the thumb of the menfolk in her family. So that is what she is saying, and she has actually copy-pasted a translation of a particular verse. So I would be discussing this verse to the end of the session. But before I do that, I need to discuss certain pointers. I'll be sharing certain aspects from my own study and reflection on Dharmasastra for the last few years that helps us to actually understand, dive deeper into the text than mere reading of the excerpts and translations. Next slide, please. So when we think about Dharmasastra, the two words are there, Dharma and Shastra, and the first question is, of course, what is Dharma? Ami discussed some aspects of Dharma. She did give very wonderful definitions of Dharma. But of course there is more to it, because there is always more to everything, whatever Shastras say, whatever Rishis have given. Etymological definition and all, you have already been told that it means to support, to sustain, to bear. Definitions from Mahanarayana Upanishad, from Mahabharata, all of them saying that Dharma is that upholds everything, every beings, all of us. But what does this sustaining and upholding actually mean? I mean, after all, we all need to know what we can say, we say all these things in our daily conversation. But what does it mean to designate something as Dharma? That we have to reflect upon. So we find a more concrete definition than this vague definition of sustenance. I'm not saying vague in a negative sense. I'm merely saying it more, I think rather than vague, abstract is a more better term. So rather than such an abstract definition, we find more concrete definitions also. One such definition is in Vaisheshika Sutra, which says, Abhyudaya Nishresa Siddhi Sadharma. Dharma is that from which results, Siddhi results, the accomplishment of Abhyudaya and Nishresa. So these are two terms. Abhyudaya means overall well-being, the material well-being, and Nishresa is spiritual well-being. And what does this mean, actually, these terms? We find an elaboration in Swami Vidyaranyam, Sri Madhavacharya, his commentary on Parashara Smriti. Because in Parashara Smriti, we find another interesting definition. Parashara sage calls Dharma as hitam, that which is beneficial. So there, Madhavacharya, he explains what does it mean to beneficial. You can read the quote there. Basically, it says, Dharma is hitam or beneficial, as it is a means to our desired goals. So whatever desires we have, we can, there are different means to attain them. But not all means are good, in the sense are beneficial. If we want to make money, we can loot a bank, or we can put in hard work. So looting a bank means you go to prison. So that is not beneficial to us, right? So this is a simple example. So he says, such desired fruits are two types. So Dharma is capable of giving us two types of fruits, which is this worldly Ahika and other worldly Amushmika. And these are all technical terms again. So this worldly results means Artha and Kama, all our material prosperity, material pleasure, everything comes. So that is why we say Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Dharma comes first, because Dharma, within the confines of Dharma, you have to pursue Artha and Kama. Then there is Amushmika results, otherworldly. What are they? Swarga and then Moksha. So Dharma directly leads to Swarga, and indirectly through Chitta Shuddhi leads to Moksha. So that is what this Madhavacharya says. So what is the gist of this? The whole thing is that when we designate an action as Dharma, it has a particular connotation, that it should have the ability to give those desired results, such as Ahika well-being, as well as leading to Swarga, Moksha, such things. Next slide, please. A further clarification here on what I just said, we find in the Manusmriti itself there is a verse which says, for the due discrimination of actions. So this is important. So when we speak about Dharma in the human context, it is always about actions. Not just something, we cannot name everything Dharma. It is always about an action. So for the due discrimination between action, to differentiate between one type of action and another type, Dharma and Adharma was created. What is the criteria for differentiation? There he says, and he connected, Bhagavan connected all people, all creatures to such pair of opposites, such as happiness and sorrow, Sukha, Dukkha, Swarga, Naraka, Chitta Shuddhi, Chitta Bhranti, all these opposites he connected. So when you speak about Dharma, then it means an action. If you say this is a dharmic, this action is Dharma, it means that it should have the capacity to lead to Sukha, to Swarga, to Chitta Shuddhi. The opposite is Adharma. It leads to Dukkha, it leads to Naraka, and it leads to Chitta Bhranti, more delusion. And how does this happen? All this, basically we are speaking about action, which is karma, and swarga, etc., which are karma phala. So what is the connection? Because we find in this text saying that swarga kama yajeta. If you want to attain heaven, do this yajna. But we are doing yajna now. We are not going to swarga immediately. How does this action, which has already completed, leads to swargas in some time after death, which is not visible to us? So the Mimamsakas say this happens because of the notion, they bring in the notion of apurva. Basically, it is potentiality, the potential result. When you do an action, it results an invisible potentiality which exists through the time until it actually manifests on the ground. That becomes actuality. So that is apurva. So this apurva is of two types. Punya papa. We are all heard of the term punya papa, though we may not have heard the term apurva. So punya and papa are two types of apurva. Punya is the positive beneficial potency. Positive beneficial potency which is generated by the performance of dharma and which in future will give the result of sukha, swarga, chitta shuddhi leading to moksha, and the papa is the opposite, as I said, dukkha, naraka, etc. So this is how, so when we, irrespective of the context of the usage, I mean there may be different contextual definitions of dharma, but irrespective of these contexts, when we say is this dharma, is this adharma, sometimes some actions could be dharma from one perspective, adharma from other perspective, but in all such contexts, the basic definition remains. If we are designating something as dharma, then it should and it has to have the capability of generating punya that leads one to swarga, leads one to chitta shuddhi and sukha, etc. The reverse for adharma. Next slide, please. I think I will be able to complete in time because I am rushing. Okay, I have 21 slides total, so I have to rush. So please bear with me. Now, I am hoping, without asking whether you did actually understand, if you have not, please take the souvenir, read the paper. I am hoping that you have understand what dharma and adharma means practically, because actions is what matters to us. Because हम कुछ भी काम करेंगे, उसका फल मिलेगा. It is unescapable truth that you do an action, you will get phala. If not today, if not next life, even after thousands and millions of lives, you have to take birth again, you have to face the consequence. So let this sink in. Why this punya, papa, this notion of dharma, adharma is very, very important. Now, once we have this clarity on dharma and adharma definition, then the question is, kya dharma hai, kya adharma hai? You know, Ami quoted Bhishma saying, sukshmati sukshma, dharma is very sukshma. Lekin pata kaise chalega? There is a good verse in Apastamba Dharmasastra which says, actions will not come and tell you, I am dharma, I am adharma. No, they don't. Whatever actions, वो तो आके नहीं बता रहे हैं, look, मैं तो धर्म हूँ, मैं तुमको स्वर्ग देता हूँ, please करो. वो खुद से तो नहीं बता रहे. I and you cannot decide on our own, independently. How will we decide that this is dharma? Even a murderer can say, oh no, I did this murder for this A, B, C, D reason, so I am right, so this is dharma for me. He can say, right? But that does that statement have any value? Does that our statement on our own mean that when we say this is dharma, it will lead to punya, swarga, etc.? No, because we have no basis. I have an article on the net on this topic about how to acquire knowledge. I won't go into detail, but in Hindu epistemology, that is theory of knowledge, all knowledge, any knowledge, there are 6 independent sources from which we can gain valid knowledge. Valid knowledge means authentic, not false illusions and such things, misconceptions, etc., but proper knowledge. 6 authentic sources, 6 independent sources. They are direct perception, that is pratyaksha, inference, anumana, and upamana, which is comparison. I won't go into details of all of them. And upamana, arthapatti is postulation, anupalabdhi is perception of a non-existence of something, and finally shabda. Our purpose, we need to understand that it is shabda alone. Shabda means word. The shastra alone can give us this knowledge of dharma and adharma. Why? Because all these notions of karma phala that we discuss, sukha, dukkha, swarga, naraka, chitta shuddhi, chitta, they are all non-empirical. We cannot perceive them with our eyes. We cannot hear them with our ears. So obviously, direct perception though out of the stadium, excluded. अब डायरेक्ट परसेप्शन के ऊपर जो अनुमान है, that is inference, that is also not workable. Similarly, comparison, etc., it does not work because all of them depend upon pratyaksha. But dharma dharma is not pratyaksha. We can speculate. I'll come to that. We can speculate, but we cannot have surety because these are non-empirical things. I and you cannot actually see कि अगर मैं ये काम कर दिया तो am I going to swarga? We cannot see it, right? So then that leaves only one thing, shabda. So shabda alone is that source from which we can gain authentic knowledge about dharma. What is this shabda? This shabda pramana, people have a lot of misconception. I don't have time to go deep into it. But basically, we all use this. For example, in the school, we study physics textbook, biology textbook, chemistry textbook. Are we actually going to conduct all these experiments that they say, Niels Bohr ne ye kiya, Einstein ne ye kiya? We are not. We are taking the word as authentic. We do that as far as physical sciences is concerned, but somehow we have a problem when Upanishad says something, Smriti, Manusmriti says something, some other text says something. We say, no, this must be the work, the Indologists will say, this must be the work of, because of the socio-political context, there must be have been patriarchy, there must have been all these things, you know that. But that is not how it is. Bhagavan Krishna himself, people nowadays, the Hindus, the woke Hindus, I would say, they say, घर में सबका घर में भगवद गीता रहता है तो that is the authority. मनुस्मृति किसी का घर में नहीं है तो वो फालतू है. This is Twitter, on Twitter you'll know such statements. But Bhagavad Gita खुद बोल रहे, Bhagavan Krishna बोल रहे कि Shastra is the pramana, is the means to understand what ought to be done, that is what is dharma, and what is ought not to be done, that is adharma. What are these Shastra? आप commentary में पढ़ोगे तो the first thing that comes is Veda, the Shruti, and then the others, Smriti, Itihasa, Purana, etc. Next slide, please. And we know this from multiple sources. ऐसा नहीं कि सिर्फ गीता का commentary में है. We have independently, for example, Mimamsa defines dharma as that which is given in the injunctions, Vidivakyas of the Veda. That is a definition of dharma at all. So if we want to know dharma, then Veda Vakyas, what they injunct is dharma. And because Veda is the independent source, it is Apaurishaya, it is an independent source of dharma. And all other texts, the Smritis, Itihasa and Puranas, they're dependent source. They are dependent upon Veda because they derive from Veda. How do they derive? For example, the Manusmriti, we have an entire discussion there, but even other Smritis, all these acharyas, all these great rishis, these were all trikalagnas. They could see the past, present and future. And they had this capability, they had studied the Veda in its entirety. That Manusmriti says, in addressing the Manu, he says, Asya sarvasya vidhanasya. All these vidhana means vidhi means Veda. You are the one tattvartha with prabho. That is how he is defined. You are the one who knows all the vidhis, all the Veda in its entirety. Sarvasya Vedanasya. Both the karma portion as well as tattva jnana portion, you know entirety. You know the entirety of Veda. That is how the Manu is defined. Similarly, other rishis like Parashara, Yajnavalkya, etc. Secondly, we find this interesting explanation in Jayanta Bhatta and Nayayika, Nyaya Vidwan from 9th, 10th century. He says that all these rishis, they also, and even Sri Madhavacharya says in Parashara Smriti commentary that these rishis, they in their through their yogic siddhis, they had attained this, yama, niyama, etc. dhyana, they have perfected. In such a state, they focused on what is dharma and directly gained the knowledge of what is dharma. And then they taught. And we find the evidence, we find the indication of it in the very opening verses. When the sages approaches Manu, that is the opening verse. Manu did not go and say, no, I am now the king, I am saying this, you have to follow. No, that is not happening. He is sitting asinam. The first verse says, Manu is sitting in a calm state, in a meditative state. His mind is calm and focused. Then the sages come and ask him questions. So this is an indication that he is sitting in a yogic state of calmness, and when the questions were put afterwards, he could directly give them the teaching. So this is why the Manusmriti says that in all matters, Shruti and Smriti should not be criticized. It should not be sidelined, because Dharma shows forth from them. So they are the most central sources for knowing what is Dharma and Adharma. And Itihasa Puranas are in turn based on Veda and Smriti. I have a theory, a hypothesis that it would take a decade work to actually prove it with evidences, that Mahabharata is a running practical commentary on Manusmriti. What Manusmriti says, Mahabharata shows through different examples and different contexts, various dharma sankatas, it puts in the mix and shows how this dharma actually plays out. Amiji gave example about Kaushika Rishi and Satya, etc. So this is how Mahabharata is a practical commentary. And that is why Itihasas are very important for us, because it helps us to contextualize the teachings for our own lives. But contextualization does not mean the essential teachings changes, right? Just because in Kaushika's case, ahimsa take precedence. I think it's Kaushika's story. I'm referring to the story of whether telling the truth or, helping the people to escape. There it took precedence. That does not mean that Satya becomes Adharma, right? So we have to see what is happening, what is the real definition of Satya. So all this is there. Can you put a next slide? So apart from these textual sources, which are the primary sources, we have secondary sources, which is, one is Sadachara. The acharas of our elders, acharas such as we read achara, how Rama lived, how Krishna lived, how Yudhishthira lived, or how our gurus lived, or how elders in our own families lived, all our civilizational heroes, the heroes of our community, these are all Sadachara, because we believe that they were very knowledgeable and they lived by their dharma. So we can follow them. And then finally there is also Atmatushti, Atmatrupti, that when everything is taken care of, we live in a dharma sankata situation. Ultimately I have to take decision because I am the one who will face the karmic consequence. That sage went to Naraka ultimately, right? It was consequence of his decision. So then I have to dwell upon all these different things that I have learned from the Shastras, from our elders, and then contextualize them into my own situation. And sometimes there may be two different dharmas, Mitra Dharma as well as Greater Dharma. We have to decide which is Greater Dharma, which is Lesser Dharma. The Arjuna's, the Gandiva episode is a good example. That does not mean that if you are violating Lesser Dharma, you will not get the karma phala of that. You will. But now in this context, violation of the Greater Dharma is more problematic. So life is not black and white. When they study the Smritis, they have a problem because Smriti is by nature a Vidhi and Nisheda. So they teach you in black and white with nuances in between. But we see the black and white, we miss the nuances. So that is problematic. So now, what are the implications of what I said? I now defined what is Dharma, and then I mentioned that the only true source of knowing what is Dharma and Adharma, because they are non-empirical, is the Shastras, Veda, Smriti, and also Itihasa Purana. Now, what is the implication of this? The popular misconception among all of us is that Smritis are law books, they are constitution. And now somebody was writing on Twitter that constitution is our Smriti of this age. No, it is not. It cannot be, because first, it is not composed by a rishi who was Trikalagna, who knew Veda fully. Second, its contents are not, I will discuss the content, subject matter of Smritis in shortly. The contents of the constitution does not actually cover the landscape of Smritis at all. So, Smriti is not a law book. It is not a religious book like a Bible, which was hegemonically implemented, hegemonically put on the society. Why? Because what we understood, Smriti, Itihasa Puranas, they are Pramana Shastras. What does it mean they are Pramana Shastras? That they reveal knowledge. See the yellow highlighted portion? Being a Pramana Shastra implies Manu and other Smritis are concerned only with revealing the connection between karma and karma phala. If you do this again, you get sarga. That is karma, karma phala. They reveal this. If you do murder, you will get narka. They reveal this. अब हमको करना है नहीं करना हम पे है. It's our responsibility. So they are not law books. They are not constitution. And they are not religious books having a biblical kind of hegemonical imposition. So that is the most important implication. Even somebody may raise an objection saying that Bible has commandments. Thou shalt not do this, do that and all. We also have, because I just said, I will be discussing this again shortly, that the Veda and Smritis, they give out their advices in the form of Vidhi and Nisheda. Vidhi means do this. This is a stipulation. Nisheda means don't do this. Ye to biblically ho gaya na, they may ask. But actually what is happening is, the Vidhi and Nisheda are binding in only one sense, that it is giving us knowledge about karma and karma phala. And this karma and karma phala are eternal relationship. Ye knowledge wo reveal kar rahe, they are binding only in that sense. So they are not saying do this, hum bol diya to karna hai, aisa nahi hai. They are revealing what is good for us. Ab us karna hai ya nahi karna, humko dekhna hai. How much we align our society to dharma, we have to decide. Because we are living in Kali Yuga, 100% to nahi hoga. It's not possible. It's not practical. We have to align as much as possible based on the conditions of society, current situation, wo sab aayega usme. So another implications, and this is also important, is that understanding Smriti as a Pramana Shastra, which reveals about causal, that is causal relation between karma and karma phala, action and fruits of action, implies that this causal relationship is eternal, unchanging, and beyond the grasp of mind and senses. Again, I take the example of Yajna leading to Swarga. This happened in Satyuga. This was true in Treta Yuga. This was true even 5,000 years ago. This will remain true even 10,000 years henceforth. That doing certain Yajna will lead to Swarga, it remains true. Time change होने के वजह से ये कर्म फला का relation change नहीं होता. So people have this misconception, oh, Smriti is outdated. Smriti was written at a particular context 2,000 years ago, no longer valid. ऐसा नहीं है. We as a society have deviated from the Dharmasastra ideal, fine. But that does not make these texts invalid. This is a nuance here. We have deviated. So we may not be able to or capable of doing certain things that the texts say. Fine. But let us not dilute ourselves saying that these texts have become invalid. No. Because they are giving us knowledge which is eternal. That ye kaam karo, aapko swarg milega, ye kaam karo, nark milega. That knowledge is eternal. So contrary to popular misconception, कि स्मृति सिर्फ टाइम एक पुराना ज़माना है, ऐसा नहीं है. लेकिन अभी एक और क्वेश्चन उठता है, and that is the conclusion. However, what is changing and dependent? It does not mean that what Smriti says is something fossilized ho gaya. That's not like that. Dharma is not fossilized. It is here and now, right? So what changes is the external form of implementation, external form of dharma, not the essential principles. So जो धर्म का essential teachings है, ये स्मृति वगैरह से पढ़ के we have to understand, and then we have to contextualize that to our situation. The example of Arjuna, the example of all these examples we get, it's all about contextualization. Are you able to contextualize properly? Krishna did. He helped save the war. He said, look Arjuna, you want to kill Yudhishthira, right? Because of your woe, you have to keep. How many minutes? I will take another 5 or 10 minutes, okay? Please. I was too much to cover. So, basically, that is all contextualization. Next slide, please. Okay, I'll just skip this. I'll just say, since we have to gain knowledge about dharma from this text, we have to approach it with Shraddha, not with suspicion. If you approach with suspicion, अरे ये तो कुछ गलती बोल रहा है, इसके अंदर का कुछ मोटिव खराब है, उसका भेजा खराब है, then you will not understand. You have to approach it Shraddha. So I won't go into details. Please, next slide. Yeah, this is important. I think 5 or 6 slides. I'll just summarize very quickly. Locating dharma. When I say locating dharma, we need to understand. When you read a text, something is being said. You need to understand what is the context, how the dharma is playing out, being taught in that. So, in the Manusmriti, in the very first chapter, there is, the sages ask the questions about, give us knowledge about dharma for people. And Manu suddenly starts the discussion saying, this is how Srishti happened. First came Prakriti, and then all this happens on all different animals came, different beings came, Rakshasas came, everything came, the Varnas came, all this he gives. And then Bhrigu, he asks his student Bhrigu to give the instruction. And Bhrigu starts with all this Manvantaras, Yugas, and all this discussion. So the Western scholars have a problem. What is cosmogony and Srishti discussion doing in a text on Dharma? So all these are later additions, they say. That is not so. They have a context in place. They are helping us to locate Dharma, to conceive of Dharma and locate them in a cosmological manner, in a temporal manner, and in a teleological manner. For the lack of time, I'll just briefly say, cosmologically, how is Dharma located? You can change the slide. Yeah. Cosmologically, Dharma is located in such a way, we take Sankalpa mantras. We say that geographically where we are located, right? Dakshina, Dandakaranye, Meru, all these things, Bharatavarsha, Bharatakande and all. So that is cosmological location. So Manusmriti speaks about how we are not the only people in the universe. Bas, don't think apne aap ko bahut zyada. You are just one among the many beings. There are these Rakshasas, Vanaras, Pishachas, all the Gandharvas, they are not human tribes. I'm sorry to say, a lot of people are misled today by saying that Vanaras were a human tribe wearing a mask of a monkey. No, that's all nonsense. They were all non-human beings. Let me be very clear. I don't care if you call me a superstitious, outdated person, but that is true. They are not human. They were not human beings. They were on earthly plane, fine, Bhuloka, but they were not human beings. They were non-human beings, right? Non-human species. So Manusmriti speaks about creation of all of them, and then he speaks about humans also. So what this is saying is that a discourse of dharma cannot be done from anthropocentric position. What is anthropocentrism? Human-centric. मैं सबका बाप हो, everything I can rule, everything I can take from world. मैं अपने हिसाब से जो मैं करता हूँ वही सही है, जो मैं नहीं करता वही गलत है. ऐसा नहीं है. You have to study dharma from a selfless position. Only then you can speak about duty, right? Otherwise you will only speak from rights. So first the Manusmriti is wanting us to shift our focus from anthropocentrism and put it in the cosmological. Pehle Brahma aaya, and then he created Virat Purusha, and then all this happened. We are a very small being in the whole scheme. Then they teach us dharma for us, what is relevant to us. So cosmologically, there are many things, Manusha Dharma, Devata Dharma, Rishi Dharma, Brahmana Dharma, Kshatriya, all this are cosmological location of dharma. Similarly, temporally, we have locations such as, even in the same Sankalp Mantra, we speak about what, Tithi, Shubha Nakshatra, Karana, all these things we do, right? That is temporal location. We're placing ourselves in a particular time. Pankaj ji said yesterday, I love this quote, festivals are to time what kshetras are to place. This is same, sacred time, sacred place, where dharmic location. So dharmic teachings are also located like that. Location wise, cosmological wise, and as well as temporal wise. Next slide please. And of course, teleological location also happens. Now, Kullukabhatta, one of the commentators on Manusmriti, he says, why cosmogonical discussion is there? He says, it's because discourse on cosmogony is nothing but an enunciation of Brahma Tattva, Tattva Jnana, because a reflection upon this cosmogony leads to Brahma Jnana. So, what is the purpose of Dharma? Teleology is end result. End result is attaining moksha. So, when we speak about Dharma, 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 क्यों करते हैं भाई? क्योंकि धर्म करोगे, पुण्य कमाओगे, तो slowly go to chitta shuddhi, purify your mind, lobha, kama, mada, you remove that, you purify. Why? So that you can slowly attain moksha. Doesn't matter how you define, different darshan, differently. But everything there is common that you have to attain chitta shuddhi, and that happens through dharma. So that is why you practice dharma. And similarly, we have a locationing of dharma functionally and relationally. Functionally means based on function. आप सुनोगे कि ब्राह्मण धर्म, क्षत्रिय धर्म, वैश्य धर्म, शूद्र धर्म, इन सब का अपना एक फंक्शन है. Brahmanas has to study the Veda, teach the Veda. वो functional role है. So based on that functional role, Raj Dharma is good example. King has a functional role, so that is Raj Dharma. So this is the discourse on Raj Dharma is basically functional location of dharma. Functionally, the dharma is being located in a particular function. And a subset of this functional location is relational location. Putra dharma, matra dharma, dharma of a son, dharma of a father, dharma of a wife, dharma of a husband. All this relational context. Okay, next slide. So now the subject matter of dharma. We have different types of divisions in subject matter. For example, the most important division is Dharmasastra subject divided into three types: Achara, Prayaschitta and Vyavahara. Only Vyavahara deals with legal jurisprudence, civil, criminal cases. Achara deals with Varnashrama Dharma, that is most important. And if you are deviating from Achara, then there is Prayaschitta, which is expiation, all the vratas, etc. you have to do to remove the karmic demerit. Paap generate hota hai na, to usko nikalne ke liye you are doing something. That is Prayaschitta. Next, again I don't have time, sorry. So another thing is Vidhi Nisheda, I already discussed. Vidhi is what to be done, Nisheda is what not to be done. What Vidhi Vakya is Dharma, what is enjoined in the Shastra is Dharma, and what is prohibited in Shastras is Adharma, right? And then we also, this is very important, the things that the Shastras tell us, or guidelines, they give different types of result. Not all guidelines have the same standing. The Achara portion, Prayaschitta portion, they largely speak about Adrushta phalas, non-empirical phalas, like Swarga, etc. And Drushta Adrushta phalas. Some phalas have an empirical component and a non-empirical component. And then there are Vyavahara, for example, civil jurisprudence and all. There are a lot of instructions, guidelines which have only relevance in an external world, that is Drishtaphala. They are not absolute. This understanding is important because while Adrishtaphala, Adrishta portion is absolute, we cannot change it because it exists. Drishta portion is in our hands. It is given with the beneficial of the society in mind, fine. But we can change them, we can modify them by understanding the essential principle because society has changed. So Adrishta portion is not subject to socio-political changes, time changes, all those things, but Drishta portion is subjected to them. Okay, next. Okay, we'll skip. Next, please. Yeah. Now I'll come to the original. I need another 5 minutes, please. I'll just finish with the original example I took of Audrey. So there are two verses in Manusmriti. I have quoted here two. One of them say that in the youth, the women should remain under control of her father, later husband, and afterwards on her, with her son, and she should not take recourse to independence. The controversial aspect is independence. So the verse is saying women does not have independence. And similarly, there is another verse which says father should protect or guard the girl when she is child, later husband should protect and later son should protect. These are all very connected verses. They have related but different meanings. Now again, because I don't have time, I'll just briefly go. The first verse appears in a chapter which deals with Sri Dharma. So it is locating itself in a relational, as a relation dharma, as a cosmological dharma for Sri. For women, dharma that appears to women. And then we have to remember the definition of dharma, that it is designation of something as dharma means it leads to swarga, punya and all those things, all non-empirical things. So the verse is not about artha and kama. It is not about women empowerment or when it says that women do not have independence. It does not refer to restraining women empowerment in the financial or other senses. It is not about taking her away independence as we understand today. No. It is talking in a different context of dharma. what actions leads to punya, swarga, moksha. In that context, it's saying in those actions for doing dharma, her primary dharma as a stree is her dharma in the household context with respect to relational dharma. So for the men there is varnashrama dharma. Even there this relational aspect comes as a husband, as a father and all. For the women, the text has given a very important thing. अगर तुम ये जो अपना household duties as a mother, as a wife, as a daughter करोगे, so you will get everything that a man will get by doing lots of sadhana and everything. That does not mean she cannot do sadhana and all. She can. There are vratas and all given for, Karwa Chauth and all this famous. It's for her. अब feminists बोलेंगे सिर्फ women के लिए क्यों है? अरे men के लिए दूसरा चीज भी है ना, ऐसा तो नहीं है. But point is, it is speaking in the context of dharma. Now the people have issue with the word vasha, that is dependence here, that you are in control. Here, we are living in a society. Are we truly anybody is independent? I am dependent upon my wife, I am dependent upon my parents, my parents are dependent upon me. In the school, in the office, the boss is dependent upon the subordinates to perform, subordinates are dependent upon the boss to delegate the responsibility. Dependence sab jagah hai. So why should we think that dependence means is a negative term? We don't need to. It could be negative, toxic in certain contexts, but by definition it is not negative. So we have to understand. So, इसमें बहुत फंडा है, lot of because of lack of time I cannot go through nuances, but the verse is basically saying this. It is defining dharma of women, the means by which she can get moksha and punya and all those things in a relationship manner, in a relational term. Why? Because both men and women need karma yoga, but there is a biological, psychological, physical differences between men and women. So the men's duty, karma yoga, is defined in terms of more of austerity and ritual performance and such things. Women's duties are defined more in terms of shushrusha, devotion, shushrusha. That is why women's stree dharma is defined as a relational dharma to father, husband, etc. Whereas for men, the dharma is defined in terms of varnashrama dharma, the yagyas you do and all. This does not mean that there are no rituals for women. There is, of course. This does not mean there is no shushrusha for men. There is, of course. Manusmriti says if you do not serve your mother and father well, then no other action will give fruit to you. So if you are mistreating your parents, abusing them, beating them, then no amount of sadhana will give you any result. This is as simple as that. So dependence is not an issue. And this nuance between different dharmas, abhi do log same nahi hai. I am not same as my mother or my friend, anybody. Then how can you expect paths of two people to the same goal will be same? So that is, we are not monotheistic religion, please. Next, please. Just last, I'll conclude. So the twin aspect, with this I'll conclude, the twin aspect of it is the other verse which is about protecting and guarding. It is in the context of husband-wife duties, and it is actually teaching about Purusha Dharma. That is why location is important. The first was Stree Dharma, this is Purusha Dharma. It is saying, it is putting the duty upon the men folk. Here the Swatantra does not mean independence, it means unprotectedness. All commentators have cleared this. Swatantra means unprotectedness. Women should not be left open for harassment, as simple as that. It may be external interference with her doing her Swadharma freely, or it may be she only deviating from dharma. Husband's or father's role is that of a guru. As children, do we not listen to our parents? Is it not a duty of a parent to tell child what is good for them, what is bad for them, at least to a certain age? So this is what the vision is. That when they say that, आजकल feminist का argument है कि why do you tell women what should be the length of the skirt? Why don't you teach men to not look at them? ये वही कर रहा है, but they consider Manusmriti as misogynist. That is what Manu is doing. He is telling, look boss, as a father you have a duty to protect your daughter. As a husband you have a duty to protect your wife. As a son you have a duty to protect your mother. And as a man, apart from your wife, you have to look at whole women across the world as your mother. So सबको protect करना तुम्हारा duty बनता है या नहीं? Right? This is as simple as that. ये सब nuances नहीं होने की वजह से we think our translation में पढ़ लिया independence बोले तो oh no chain लगा के घर में रख दो. That is not. Manusmriti clearly says, you cannot protect women by force. She has to guard herself. She has to ensure that she lives a dharmic life. This is true to men, true to women. So with this I conclude. I am sorry I could not take more time. I could not explain more well because I had to rush. But basic thing is that when you, to understand dharma, you have to engage with the Shastras. Not necessarily Veda, sabko Ved padna hoga nahi, we don't have time, we don't have energy. And everybody cannot even study Smritis because it needs, isko crack karne mein, it took many years to even realize this. I used to also think all this socio-political nonsense and all. So, but Itihasa Puranas are very easy. We all like stories. Please engage with the text. Read the text in original. Read modern adaptations, good. Ami's books are very good, I am recommending it. But read originals. Read Bibek Debra's translation. If you don't know Sanskrit, read it in English. Read it in Kannada, read it in Telugu, read it in... But read the original text and don't read it. Baith gaya, 6 mahine mein pura cover to cover Mahabharata complete kar diya, post kar diya, I finished Mahabharata. No. Read it throughout your life. Engage with each incident. Reflect upon it. It will help you even without realizing that your life slowly dharma ke marg mein aa jayega. Read it. Engage with. Have Shraddha. Shraddha ke bina Shraddha labhatevan jnanam. You know, that is what Krishna says. I think I might have spelled the Sanskrit verse wrongly. But that is my last message. That read it with Shraddha. Engage the text. Don't hate the text. Engage with it, learn from it. If you don't understand something, you don't find something comfortable, keep it aside for now, that's fine. But don't hate the text. Thank you. Shri Guru Brahma.